Welcome to the Marketing Meeting podcast. I'm happy to host Reid Robinson today. He's the lead product manager at Zapier. Zapier is a workflow automation software company, as a lot of marketers would know. Great to meet you, Reid. Welcome.
Thanks for having me on, and hello, everybody.
Reid, your LinkedIn headline has 3 words, which it says, building AI products. That's one of the main reasons that I wanted to really talk to you, because I want to talk to the expert. But there's also another thing in your profile. It says you are a student of social media. So it gives a clue about your personality and your style, because instead of saying you are an expert of social media, you are saying you are a student of social media, which is quite important for me, because when I look to your background, you worked at Hootsuite, now at Zapier, and these are very important platforms for marketers. So that's why I would like to ask questions about automation, especially, which is a big question mark, especially on marketer side. After some announcements say that 95% of marketing agencies will disappear. So it's all about automation and what will automate soon, what will not, and those type of questions. So I would like to start with a broader question, and then we can deep dive to some of the practical things that can help you listeners on this journey. So which areas of marketing do you think AI will have the most significant impact in the, let's say, next 1 year?
In the next 1 year for marketers, I think I want to say personalization of some of the things. What I mean by that is I think some of the ones we've seen I think impact today, a lot of users doing things like content draft and stuff like that. But I don't know if draft content is going to have like a massive impact for marketers. I think one of the things at least from a marketing use case is going to be around being able to personalize some customer communication in ways that, as you pointed out, I've worked in the world of like marketing tech for quite a while, and I feel like along that journey, personalization has been a hot topic for a very long time. And I actually think, done it through various ways of, okay, we're personalizing the links in this email template, or we're personalizing the subject line of these emails. But with generative AI, you can really do an impressively wild amount of personalization. Like you could do the entire email. You could do the entire when you do the email. And yeah, I think that's probably what I think I'm most excited about. One of the initiatives I helped internally was doing like an automated marketing campaign to recommend additional use cases that did use like a generative AI step to help, kind of, I guess, in essence, hallucinate an additional use case for that user. But we actually ended up seeing a lift in activations by recommending additional use cases through a generative AI step, which was cool. And I think that'll become more and more accessible and more commonplace. And I think as a user as well, it'd be nicer to start to see some comms come in that are like, hey, we know you were tinkering with this and you tried this, and like getting down to a much more personal level on how those comms get across. It's going to be really cool. I think that'll be pretty impactful. I think of that more from an email side. I'm yet to be clear on what that looks like from a social media side. I think how that.
So you mentioned that for email, personalization would be one of the key things, but you're not sure about social media now?
I meant in terms of how you would get personalization across to an end user, other than advertising, which is kind of doesn't scale all that well to do a very niche thing, right? Like you can do a one-to-one personalization effort at scale with email very effectively, as well as in product, I should say, right? Like your in-product marketing capabilities also, especially as these models can get faster and faster, you can start to do things there for that too.
I have one question. For example, I'm a marketer and I've worked in various projects. Sometimes it's a high-end jewelry brand. Sometimes it's a tech brand. sometimes it's a kids furniture brand or so on. And then, for these brands, I do search on platforms, which is like, Google search, and then now including ChatGPT, Instagram, social media, and so on. And whenever I do it, I mean, like, you can understand by going through my social feed, you can understand which type of project I'm doing. I'm either like they are expecting me to have a baby soon because I'm checking kids furniture, or they expect that I'm a tech SaaS marketer, something like that. It really screws up. I mean, whenever I got into a project, it screws up my social media, which in case I'm a marketer and I'm working with a variety of brands, and I couldn't find any way to turn it around. I mean, because we assume that, this person is suddenly interested in kids furniture. But it's not the case. I mean, like, I think in that case, social media is a little bit trickier to understand, I guess, if you don't know the context to that person's personal life, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, this one can get very deep in terms of how, the world of niche advertising and content and personalization, and how much people want that or not. Actually, that honestly is a fun tightrope walk. I'm sure all marketers are familiar with, particularly those on the advertising side of things. Um, it's fascinating. I think I don't know. Honestly, I probably don't have the greatest insights to say here, other than the fact that I really do hope for a future that does have like more transparency of what information you're like giving up from yourself to get a more personalized recommendations. I think that would be really cool to start to see in some search things of like, hey, for this search, I do want you to understand my personal life, right? Whereas if I do another search, maybe that search is only my work information. It's using for context. Could be cool to start to get that level of like granular control when you are looking to help from an algorithm or an AI model or whatever it is. But yeah,
Maybe, I
not
mean,
there
like, one
just yet.
day, since we can just start to customize generative AI, saying that, okay, I'm now gonna ask questions about my business and my strategy, and then includes, when it's suggesting an Instagram feed, then it then excludes those type of things. But what are the areas, since you are so much into automation with Zapier, what are the areas that marketing automation will be adapted fast and very soon? I know that a lot of marketers are have already adapted them, but still, as I see from my friends and from my colleagues, a big portion of them haven't adopted marketing automation yet. So what are the things that are going to be automated fast and soon?
Yeah. So the top use cases that we see is users using AI to generate things like draft social media posts, blog, and just overall marketing content. And I'll give you example use cases would be things like you have an automation that'll run where every time you add a work topic to like an Airtable, if you put it to a certain status in Airtable or to a Trello card status, right? You can then kick off a kind of draft creation process where you might have given something like a ChatGPT step the access to, some sort of information on how you typically write, what your company does, what your angle tries to be. Might as well include like examples of past blog articles and to try to mimic the style that you're going for. And then you might, in like the actual run, might include some context of, hey, we want to do a campaign about X. This article should be for Y. Can you help generate a draft blog article? And then subsequent steps might try to convert that to a social media post, and like for Twitter and the LinkedIn one, and then a Instagram recommendation, and then kind of output that to a marketer so that you have a lot of you're just at a closer state. I'd say at this point, definitely more of like a draft is the right way to think about it. The other side that would have saw it is like converting. I'm sure marketers here are very familiar with the concept of like taking a long form article and then repurposing it in various different formats. The model's also pretty good at getting you further along, right? Like, hey, our team or a company that we are partners with just published this blog article. Can you help recommend like what our take on this should be, or like what could a tweet for this be? And it, I think back to the days at Hootsuite where like RSS feeds were a big thing, where people were just reposting from an RSS feed. And it's kind of like that. You can do something similar, but at least now you can start to personalize it, and you can start to make it about your brand, and you can start to make connections and get it to a much closer state than you would by just looking at a raw RSS feed. You could even add some, like, I'll put the word intelligence in air quotes for anybody listening, to that flow of saying like, hey, this is the RSS feed. Can you tell me which of these articles do you think are like relevant to our business priorities? Right. And then so you can actually start to like triage your RSS feeds of content as well. So things like that, we are probably, I want to be clear, like number one that we're seeing today. Number two is interacting with customers and draft for that. So whether you want to automate responses to customer inquiries and give it information on like your business, whether that's the sales or support inquiries, reviews, helping you automatically reply to customer reviews, things like that seem to be very helpful. After that, data extraction. This is more on like if anybody on the side is like a lead generation side of marketing. There's all those times where you have like unstructured data that you just like kind of wish came to you as a form. Anytime you want that, great use case. Because you can basically tell these models, hey, you're going to get, I don't know, this sort of structure. Maybe it's like an email, but it's going to come in like all the text in one box. And I need you to help extract the subject line, the body, the first name, the last name, the company they work for, and like give me values that then I can put to my CRM. It does that incredibly well. Summarization is then a great one. So again, going back to that RSS feed style thing, like this was, take all the articles published from, I don't know, Fortune on a particular topic over this period of time. And, you can have that thing running. And then at the end of the week, maybe you get like bullet points of which ones are relevant to your business and summaries of those articles. Right. And then, yeah, like I said, that kind of like air quotes again, intelligence layer for recommendations. So you can give it information about yourself, your business, your role, the objectives. And, when given a bunch of other text, you can say like, hey, help me whittle things down. Help me figure out what is a strategy there. The last kind of, so that's what we're seeing people do in workflows, to be clear. But I think I'll touch on one other thing, which is like expanding your capabilities just as a worker or as an individual. I think that's probably one of the coolest things for me, is the fact that you can leverage, tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, whatever, to just learn more and do more than you previously could do. For marketers, that might be learning how to use Zapier, right? Maybe in the past you've tried to use Zapier and it's confusing. Well, now you can like talk to ChatGPT. I built an automation consultant GPT that's actually been used, I think 35,000 times at this point, which is just helping people learn about like what they can do with automations, and it recommends Zapier workflows for them. And things like that get me really excited, because you can learn coding, you can learn like all sorts of neat things that you weren't previously capable of doing that now you can do.
Just one question. When you think about like the last point is about improving yourself, about your capabilities, and then you ask how to automate, and is ChatGPT coming up already with recommendations on Zapier? Or if you ask for Zapier, that it comes with recommendations about Zapier. So that's an important thing then.
So to be clear, it depends. It sounds like, if I'm understanding the question, there is this kind of question in the industry right now of like SEO for models, right? Which is like, without prompting, right, without telling it explicitly you're interested in Zapier, is the model going to recommend Zapier, right? If I just say, hey, I'm looking to automate my job, can you give me ways to do that? I probably would recommend Zapier. But I don't really know. But yeah, that's the world. There's a fascinating field of marketing emerging for like SEO, because then the following question is, how can we influence that? Right? Like, how can we as marketers influence?
That's why I was asking this question.
Yeah, well, it's a fun topic, because I mean, OpenAI announced this week that they are working on training their next big model, And with that comes scraping the entire internet essentially. And yeah, as a marketer, you're like, well, we have a lot of content on the internet. Are there things we can do that then help us rank higher in this like raw response from these foundational models? I wish I could tell you more aside from the fact that it's a very interesting, like an unknown right now. For me, I think more of like, an actual, custom version of ChatGPT for GPTs that does have it's told to focus on Zapier, and we give it a tool that helps it like build workflows for users based on their own description of what they're looking to do. That sort of thing for now.
Because this is fascinating for me, because there are two things that fascinates and it makes me curious about this, which is the fact that I asked already. So would one day generative AI would be suggesting me platforms? Because right now, if you don't specifically ask for a platform name, like bring me names of the best automation platforms, it doesn't. It stands quite objective. But I feel that OpenAI, Gemini, Google, they're going to soon turn it into. I'm just waiting for the day when they're going to announce, okay, we're going to start taking ads, and we're going to start, it's not going to be like only an organic thing and so on. It's going to be done and paid ad media as well. So that will change a lot of things when it comes to SEO and when it comes to how we do marketing and so on. So that's why
Yeah,
that's the
that's
question that
it's
I'm.
that's coming. I mean, that's if you're familiar with a company called Perplexity, they're kind of like a they announced last month, 2 months ago, something like that, that they're working on ads, that they will have ads in their side. By the way, I did, while we were chatting, test what are some tools marketers can use to automate their job. Zapier did come up, so
I mean,
yeah.
actually, before our conversation this week, I was doing a lot of search about automation, marketing automation. Zapier comes a lot, and actually, your website comes a lot because of the fact probably that the burning questions that a marketer would have around automation, you answer them quite well at the website. That's one of the reasons, and also. So my other question would be like, so I'm a marketer of a medium-sized brand. I don't have too many resources because, we know that at big companies, there are teams that are adopting, testing these tools and adopting it to, and cascading down these tools for the use of other employees. So, when you are a part of a corporate company, big company, somebody will, make the limitations for you, and then we'll say, okay, we're going to use this automation platform. But in a medium or small size brand, there's probably one marketer that's sitting with a very small budget, and then everyone is talking about automation, and then you open web and you see like thousands of apps, thousands of people talking about the new AI models. So where can I start as a medium-sized brand that I have no clue where to start? Everyone is using ChatGPT, and then you pay the subscription for ChatGPT. But what else? Because we know that AI and automation is more than what ChatGPT offers or Gemini offers.
Yeah, it's a fun one. So I think, all right, to start, I think one of the things I always try to help clarify is a difference between using ChatGPT, like the application that you're probably familiar with, like, I think they actually did buy the domain now for chatgpt.com, versus what I would consider using it in your sleep, right? And that's kind of in the world of ChatGPT plus Zapier, to give an example. And the way that works is through OpenAI's APIs. This gets slightly complicated because they're separate, right? Like OpenAI's API access and ChatGPT, the product, are two separate things. First of all, but an example of that difference is with ChatGPT. If you're trying to personalize an email campaign, right? You would be, I don't know how you would do that manually, but I guess you would like get some insights from a new lead that came into your email, right? Like you got a Facebook lead ad, they came in, they gave you some information. You could take that, go to chatgpt.com, enter it, tell it some information about your business, and ask for a good intro email, right? Or a good first touch
Yeah.
email. And then copy that over to Gmail and send it. With tools like Zapier, you can automate that whole process, right? You can actually now just say, hey, new every time I get a new thing from a Facebook lead ad, send some information to ChatGPT via like an API call, and ask it the same sort of question. And then whatever it replies, put into either send that email right away if you trust it, or put it into a draft step, which you could allow you to have like a manual step for you to review that content before it goes out. So those are the kind of that's a key differentiation I want to be clear to people. I think I talked to a lot of people who are like early on who are struggling to understand the opportunities that are available when they start to kind of put this like under the hood or run while you sleep or any way that helps you think through that. So that's number one. Number two, I'd say I'd go back to what I said before about like, like you mentioned, like you saw Zapier a lot because of like our great content. That's usually a critical thing and a huge bottleneck for companies, particularly mid-sized companies. So I would think like, how can you use it somewhere to either help you repurpose your content, accelerate that process, help you review it, help you, all sorts of things of where it can help you, but also just an internal process too. There is so much internal process within companies, especially mid-sized companies and larger companies, that is very tedious, I would say. Like,
For
and
example, what are the things that are tedious in big companies?
yeah, so I'd say one is, thinking of those times where you have to, let's say, like write up a proposal for a piece of content, right? You might just have a general gist of what you want, and you then are sitting in front of a form with maybe like 25 different fields that you need to fill in. That's a great opportunity for like a synchronous use case or like a real-time use case where I would potentially take the form, write my gist, or take the form, copy and paste it over to ChatGPT, then tell it the gist of what I'm hoping for a piece of content to do, who I'm targeting, what the objective is, right? Like the information at a very high level that I understand, have it spit out responses for that to help me faster fill it in. So then I could say like, okay, that was good. That was bad. Oh, I need to tweak this a bit. It's just like those things that'll help you take like minutes off the task that you're doing are, I think, great opportunities to try to get familiar with the technology as well. And also because then you start to say like, oh, you know what, we have the same thing where things come into our Trello board, but then we need to convert them to Airtable records, right? Like, but they're not the same format. The great opportunity to then be like, oh, well, can I use an AI step here to say, hey, these are marketing content requests. They come to Trello from our sales team because sales uses Trello, but in marketing land, we use Airtable. And hey, can you help us get these from one spot to the other? And
And you can all do at ChatGPT like these integrations from Trello and to the Airtable integration, like combining these two on top or something else.
yeah. So like that would, in the world of Zapier land, the way that Zapier works is this concept of like triggers and actions. So triggers are like anytime something happens somewhere, and actions are then what you do with that. So, examples of like triggers would be like every time I get a new email, a new message in Slack, a new item or new row added to an Airtable base or like database, things like that. And then actions would be like sending emails, creating drafts, adding rows to an Airtable, adding Slack channel messages, all sorts of things like that. So Slack bots, again, I'll pick on content requests again. If you're a content request team, you could build a little Slack bot through Zapier that when people message your team in Slack, maybe you want to say like, hey, if this message is for content requests, can you reply to the user along with like our, I don't know, tips for writing content or tips for getting requests to help them formulate their request to our team better. And then it can automatically reply to that user or that employee in Slack, right? Like you can have these AI steps used in Slack type workflows too, which really help internally.
But for example, when you work with a variety of companies, from big companies to smaller scale companies, as far as I understand, in a smaller scale or a medium-sized brand, for example, company that comes in, who is the owner of that integration that you deal with? Who is making sure that this is adopted from a variety of teams? Because, there's like usually one marketing person, one salesperson, or like a sales team of sometimes 30 people. And then there's only one person in marketing who's trying to, get the request of all the sales team. Who's that person? Is it like the IT, or is it the marketer, or chief
Yeah,
technology officer, if there is?
especially for medium-sized businesses, it's going to be a marketing ops person a lot of the time. First of all, I'd say shout out to all the team of one marketers out there. If you're listening, it's you. You probably knew that already. When you heard the question, you're like, "There's nobody that's going to own that for me." Yeah, that's quite honestly mostly the answer we see from that size of a business, right? Like, if you don't have like a proper IT department that oversees like marketing, IT in particular, then it's probably going to be you. For now, we do see like, Zapier does have a lot more of like, and we could go all the way up to larger enterprise businesses. And for that, you do get into deployments that are like owned by IT and then enabled across the organization. But I would say the way Zapier typically starts in a business and grows is through departments and through the individuals, particularly folks like marketing ops, recruiting ops, any of those sorts of things where they're the folks who already understand how like those workflows interact. And now they're learning that they can actually like automate some of those workflows or make them more efficient across their organization. Starts to open up a lot of possibilities. That's number one. Yeah, that's typically like the path of Zapier, if you will.
What are the things that they come up with when they request an automation? They'll probably have an idea. Okay, I want to automate content, or I want to automate this or that. What's that thing that they usually come up the first?
You know what? I'll be honest. I, I don't necessarily know, because Zapier's like, in terms of use cases broadly, um, if we're speaking more broad than AI, lead management, lead capture, lead generation, and lead management, like anything related to leads is very big, which makes sense, particularly because, as anybody in that space knows, response time is like absolutely critical, right? So if you're generating new leads, particularly from an ad source like Google Ads or LinkedIn ads or Facebook ads, right? Anywhere like that where someone is like giving you their information and they want to be contacted about something, you don't just want to be like, all right, well, let's get back to them in like 48 hours when someone can call them, is like not great. And so that becomes a big thing with Zapier, because the way that folks want to like get that information into, the thousands of CRM tools that exist in the world, the spreadsheet tools, they might want to reach out right away. That's again where like AI steps we've seen be used, where they're personalizing that first touch response. So it's not just the same email every single time. You can start to incorporate things there. Yeah, so that's one of the strongest ones that we see a lot of, particularly for marketers.
So, which of the functional areas? So, we've talked a lot about how AI would help a marketer to automate things, but what are some areas that's going to be slower to adapt? Because there will be some things that is slower to adapt because of the habits and because of the learnings that we have from the back. That's a human flaw. But there is also the other part of AI, which the technology will be a little bit harder to progress. So what do you see there?
Yeah, I think first thing I'll point out is really interesting, at least internal data. I don't have a lot more broader data to share, but one of the interesting trends we've seen from us in our internal adoption, so for reference for anybody, we're about an 800 person company. And AI adoption for us is, I think we've got, I forget the exact stat, but around like 35% of all employees are using AI automation today. And that breakdown is almost identically proportional across the entire company. So like every team seems to adopt it to the same degree as every other team, which is fascinating. We did not expect that result, and this is us with our own company, right? We didn't expect that result. So I'm very curious to see as more and more data comes out from the world, how that looks for other businesses. And yeah, just to get to, I do think there are jobs that are certainly harder for these models to do today. Not like numbers is the biggest one, right? Numbers is a very big one, and doing data
But
now,
when you mean numbers, what do you mean exactly?
like dealing with numbers. Like these are still language models. OpenAI does have things like the data analysis and stuff, but accuracy is still not there to really rely on these functions. And so I think that's an area that becomes very difficult for them. Particularly if you're, as you get to be a larger and larger business and want to rely or need to rely on that. Yeah, that'll be probably one of the slower ones to adopt. Is anywhere where you're trying to use it over like data sets of numbers, difficult today. Getting better in the last year. It's been incredible improvements, but I think that'll be a much harder one than some of the more, I don't know, free-form text type of things there. Other, in terms of team side, yeah, I don't know, because every team has their own, like IT, for instance. People may be like, oh, like, what is an IT team going to do? But a big use case that I had come up with a lot from folks in IT was, hey, we get a lot of messages from employees in Slack complaining, or not complaining, but like bringing up issues with their laptops or with software they're running, right? Like I'm sure anybody that's worked in, I don't know, a somewhat decent sized company has probably put a Slack message or Microsoft Teams message somewhere saying like, hey, this is broken. Can someone help me? Right. But those teams need to get those requests into an actual queue, right? Like an actual request management tool like Jira or something. And again, as I was saying before, those teams were spending, I had one person do the math on this, and it was an incredible amount of time, that because they would have to take the freeform text and put it into a structured ticket where it needed like, okay, who brought this request up? What was the issue? Who should this go to? Who should be triaged this likely, right? Like there was a lot of fields that needed to be filled in.
And also categorization involved.
Exactly. And that was a step where they were able to automate, I think with, I think it was almost 90% accuracy through Zapier with like the AI steps in the middle. Because now they were just like, hey, like you need to extract this data from these messages and like put it into this queue. And they saved like hundreds of hours. And especially it was like menial hours where they were like just copying and paste these values from their chat to. So anyway, just pointing out that there are these use cases that I think are relevant to all sorts of functions. I think anytime you're trying to deal with data and numbers is probably going to be the slower things to see adopted. And of course, like things like sensitive information and whatnot. I won't get into that whole side of things with AI
like
right
cultural,
now. But yes,
security.
Yes, yeah. There's, I would say, the more obvious things on that side, but less obvious. Yeah, data is probably the one I would say.
One question, when you start working on projects, because you happen to work with a lot of different types of clients, where some of them are providing much more information, some of them are not. So when you start a project, which projects flow easier, smoother, and faster? Like in terms of the client side, if they come up prepared or if they come up, like what are there some things that helps you go and help them automate?
Got it. All right. So again, focusing on AI for the topic of today.
Yeah.
Number one broadly before AI is familiarity with their systems, right? Like if someone's like, oh, I want to automate something with Marketo, right? And I'm like, okay, do you know your Marketo system? If the answer is no, we're going to have problems, right? Like that's a bit of an issue. Or if they're like, I want to deal with extracting this information from HubSpot. I'm like, okay, do you know like what field you're looking for in HubSpot and what object that's on? If you don't know that, trying to automate it is going to be difficult, right? So just knowing that like the source or the destination of your information. Within AI, the thing that becomes critical, I would say, is getting these models context. Typically in the workflows that are valuable, you're not running things where you're just blanket asking the model to give you something with like, you're not just saying generate a blog article about automation, right? Like that's not going to get you a high value output. more likely what you want to ask is, we're this type of business with this audience, with this focus area. There's, this interesting trend right now on, like film, like Mad Libs, right? Like you want to do an advanced Mad Libs. And the challenge becomes figuring out where in your organization and where in the world, if it's the wider web, you can get the fill in the blanks, right? Like if you're
Yeah.
trying to do personalized email campaign, do you know where in your CRM you have information on, things like that would be helpful, like job title, what products they use. Do you have anything records about their use case, right? Like what can give you information that when combined and provided to like an LLM will give you an output that feels valuable. And typically that's going to come with context, but actually being clear on where and how to get that context and those fill in the blanks becomes a bit of a challenge. But when I've worked with customers who do come with, hey, I'm familiar with our systems, we have this idea in mind, and we know like we've played. And typically a good way to experiment with this, by the way, is like is with ChatGPT or with the OpenAI playground. If you like can just write what you're thinking about asking it and throw in the context of like a sample record, right? Like it just need to be real data to start to get some confidence of like if it's possible. You can just like try to test around with like, okay, when we gave it job title, it gave better responses. When we gave it that customer's list of existing products, it gave better responses, right? Try to get some semblance of what gets you a valuable response, depending on what you're trying to do.
Perfect. So back to the same question of, okay, I'm a marketer in a medium-sized brand and I don't have too much budget. I only use ChatGPT to, produce some social media content and so on. What would be the next step? Is it going to be like starting to work with a company like software automation company like Zapier, or, what would be the next step for me, for example, if I'm a marketer just using ChatGPT to generate posts, to generate blog posts, and that's it? I mean, I use ChatGPT, but I'm saying any type of generative AI platform.
Understood. I mean, for anybody, I will say there's interesting things like, if especially budget constrained, Google Gemini, for instance, has a very generous free tier for their API usage. So I'd highly recommend checking that out. I think it's something like, what is it, 1,000 requests a day, which is it's just a lot. I want to be clear. That's a lot of requests. So requests being like jobs, tasks, whatever word you want to think about, like times you can interact with the model in a workflow. So that'd probably be number one on the budget side. Number two, I would say ChatGPT is a great, like, especially they opened up the free tier a little bit more. I would say, as I said before, try to figure out what your like prompt is that you think if you were to be able to automate this would get you valuable stuff, right? I wouldn't recommend testing your prompts once you've got your automations running. You kind of want to have confidence of, like I said, hey, I found if I ask this type of question with this type of context, I get a valuable result. And if I could actually automate that and have it run while I'm sleeping, fantastic. Like that's going to be really valuable for the business. I think experimenting in that way can really help you, because then you're not building a whole workflow and whole system and then trying to get, because you kind of, that's a very difficult part to get right, I'll be clear. And it's also the part that like once you can get right, I think makes it kind of illuminates, oh wow, it was really good at doing I don't know, like recommending the intro paragraph of an email, but it didn't do the rest of the body really well. Like maybe you could only get good confidence on the intro paragraph. Well, now you know, like you want to build a workflow that's going to get you that intro paragraph, and maybe you figured out like what sort of context fields are needed. So that would be the other thing I'd recommend is, and also the model, like the base models are, you can just talk to them about it too. They do seem to have a lot of information on Zapier and other tools. So just ask it as well. Be like, hey, I'm
Yeah.
a marketer for this business. What are some way? And I use these tools, right? Recommends things that I can do. That was why I built like our little automation consultant GPT that
Hmm.
anybody can use as well. So yeah,
Hmm.
some funky things you can start to do to kind of, again, that's what I meant by like, you kind of stretch your capabilities because all of a sudden you might have access to a wealth of knowledge of automation and marketing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I always ask like day to day, sometimes like, especially before podcasts, I ask ChatGPT, okay, so what areas in marketing, like the questions that I'm asking to you, I ask it so see what they come up with. And for example, the thing that you said about numbers, that is like, it's a little bit tricky. It never came up, although I was asking similar questions. So that's why, I mean, I always believe that still human interactions are quite valuable in business. And also, these models, as I understand, it's briefing the model is one of the most important things. Just like working with an artist or a creative person, the way how you brief that person is so important that if I brief that person or if someone else briefs that person, you're going to get two different creative work. And so that's the value that we add as people. That's why I believe that who facilitates is as important as the model itself. Although I'm really positive about like all this technological advancements of ChatGPT, or sorry, that I keep on promoting ChatGPT, but generative AI in general and AI going forward. But yeah, I also believe in the who facilitates that conversation and that work actually. So my last point would be around social media, because you are a student of social media because you have been in the social media world for so long. How do you think with all this automation, especially in social media, how do you think things will evolve in social media? Like, will there be any change on how we communicate or how we are going to use social media?
Hmm.
Would that be evolving soon, in your opinion?
Hmm. I mean, it clearly is. I think the big thing that a lot of people are trying to do now is like automate, at least that I see, is like, I mean, the usage of AI and social media has been around for longer than I've been working in it, since 2014, I want to say. Right. Like, no, anybody here is probably familiar with like bots on Twitter and stuff like that. Right.
Oh yeah.
Um, but yeah, and like I think we see a lot of people now trying to like automate their like LinkedIn comments and stuff like that. Not the greatest use cases. I hope we see better use cases over time. Um, yeah, like I said, I think for me right now, what I'm seeing is like converting and being able to repurpose content. Video, right, is a big one. There's a lot of tools right now that are trying to help you take existing video assets and use AI to splice them into TikTok formats, right? You see a lot of like, it's why you see a lot of TikTok videos these days that feel a bit like choppy and split for things. Yeah, it's cool, right? Again, I recognize, a lot of people are a team of one on their efforts, or they're being asked to do things that like, they're like, I never created a video before. Like, I don't know how to do that. And so, yeah, if there's a tool that can get you something that feels like 80% good, well, you're probably going to use it. So I think we'll see more and more of that. I think we'll see like AI do a lot more in like ad creation, ad delivery, as well from the platforms themselves. I think that'll be a pretty cool part, is when that kind of like model runs happen on the user level. Um, that'll be fascinating. And then what else in the world of social media? I don't, I don't know as much. Yeah.
Yesterday, I was commenting on a post of a friend, and then I started trying a premium LinkedIn Premium once in a while. I try that, and then I just give up. And then it's now recommending me AI
Yeah.
generated comments on posts. Of course, I never use them because they are so generic. And then I wrote a comment, and I said, I mean, like, and that day I was using a lot of generative AI, and then at the end of the comment, I said, I mean, like, my post and my comment sounds really like AI, and I'm afraid because it's so generic. And and there was
I
like a laughing moment. Yeah.
Yep. It's a weird
But
one.
I feel like on my side that I feel social media is for actually the main purpose of social media is to connect people and then for that people to communicate. And as much as these like when I see automated comments on my posts, I just don't want to interact because I know that it's automated. I know that it's generated by a bot or whatever. And then it gets me, I'm quite bored. And whenever I see like a real comment from a person, then I, interact and I want to use it. So in that case, I see an opportunity here because as a brand, if you don't overuse AI and then you try to make things different than how AI platforms are doing, then you have the opportunity to stand out in the crowd because everyone is probably adopting the same automated models and same automated formats, like, TikTok formats that everything is very clear, same captions in the same graphic design or so on. So that's how, although I'm a big believer of AI in terms of facilitation and in terms of helping out in projects, but when it comes to too much of doing that, too much of automation, too much of relying on it, I think it's gonna, create a lot of mundane and boring stuff that the companies that are not using it too much or just using it with this in mind, then will stand out. That's my personal take on the social media thing.
It's a good. Yeah, I would agree. That's why, like, I work in AI. I don't use AI to actually help me write LinkedIn posts or anything like that because I find it just, I don't know, sounds way too, I don't know, AIE is the best way to put it these days.
Yeah, your posts are anyway quite. It doesn't sound like AI, and then although your profile says you are building AI products, so this already gives a clue about where we are going.
Yeah. But I do use it sometimes to like help with ideas for it, which is I think like that ideation stage is fascinating. And as well, I like getting it to write something and then like critiquing it into oblivion is maybe a good way to put it, where you're like, hey, can you help me do a post about this? And then you see what it does and you're like, oh my God, what a horrible post. Let me write it. But it's like, I don't know what it is, but like that act of, it sounds horrible to say this out loud, but I guess that act of judging its output kind of gives me a better path to forming my own ideas. Because I'm like, oh, it said that very poorly. And then I'm like, okay, well, what would be a better way to say that? And then it kind of helps me get going. So sometimes I can find myself get unstuck by getting a horrible output and then at least in motivating me to do a better job.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So 2 personal questions. Well, not
Sure.
personal, but that I ask to every other guest. If you could recommend one book, either it be a business book or a regular book, what would it be?
Yeah. I mean, right now I'm extremely into the Red Rising series, which is a sci-fi book. Absolutely love it for anybody that likes
I've
Hunger
never
Games.
heard about that, by the way.
Well, if you like Hunger Games, it's kind of similar type of feel, if you will. It's a bit darker, honestly, but really good. However, more, I don't know, relevant. I really liked this book by Elizabeth Gilbert, who is the author of Eat, Pray, Love. She wrote a book called Big Magic, which is all about creative thinking and things like that, which I actually found very helpful for myself. One of the things that I often get involved with is kind of like ideation, and that from like both a product and use case side of things. And sometimes it can be really challenging to like think through these, I don't know, interesting ideas with new technology, right? And I think it was fascinating to me to read a book from an author focusing on this concept of creativity and fostering like creative endeavors and thinking, which was like, she was very focused for, I think, the readers who were mostly people who wanted to write books. But it was cool because, it's something like I would absolutely have never think about writing a book. But it was cool to think about how she thought about her creative process and to think through the parallels of how that relates to, even something as mundane as like the creative process of a LinkedIn post, right? And like what might be a relevant and fun thing to think about, and ideas and even use cases. Like I'll give you one really, she had a very interesting concept of, what was the word? But anyway, like ideas or thoughts, right? About like ideas for books was her thing, and how they like she had this concept that ideas kind of float around the world, and they just like bounce into random people and stick in their heads. And if you don't, it might hit someone else as well. And the interesting thing for me though was this concept of acknowledging the idea and processing it and being comfortable to say no to the idea and move on. Because I think one thing that's challenging with a lot of the tools that are out there and just the pace of things too, it's like, oh, I want to try this. I have this idea for this. And then you might need to say like, all right, you know what? It's a cool idea, but this idea is not for me. Like, thanks for coming to me, idea. Go have a great day. I hope you find someone like cool out there to work with you. Really
I mean
fascinating.
that's the book that I've read a while ago. It's been a few years. I think she published that book, but I didn't read her main book, which is Eat, Pray, Love. Instead of that, I read the Big Magic. It's a pretty nice one. So, what's your favorite cafe place in Vancouver?
Ooh, if you're in Vancouver, I really like Milano coffee.
Milano.
There was one near the Hootsuite office in the area of Mount Pleasant. They just have they had great coffee. There was one spot in particular that was over a park that looked over the mountains. Very pretty. For anybody who's been to Vancouver, it's like number one thing people tell me. It's like, oh my God, it's so pretty there. So
that's what they say. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's definitely.
A lot of my friends come over there to ski and snowboard. But I've never been there. I hope to be there soon. Reid, thanks a lot for your time on midday and midweek. I really appreciate it. And it was nice to meeting you as well. Thanks for being a guest on my podcast.
Thank you so much.